Senator Berg, Senator Elkins, Senator Harper Angel, Senator Mays Bledsoe, Senator McDaniel, Senator Nemes,
Present.
Senator Storm, Senator Thayer,
Here.
Senator Wheeler, Senator Williams, Representative All,
Here.
Representative Bojanowski, Representative Bowling, Representative Branscombe,
Here.
Representative Callaway,
Here.
Representative Chester Burton,
Here.
Representative Decker,
Vic Maddox is here. You can bring your group on up. Thank y'all for being here today. We are getting some updates from two important offices and an update today on our Capitol and Annex renovations. So the floor is yours, Mr. Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Vic Maddox. I'm the Deputy Attorney General, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify today to provide you all with an update on the operation of our office. I'd like to just give you sort of a short overview of some of the major litigation that we have been pursuing for the last few years, certainly in the last 18 months, and some of the successes. Right now we are defending quite a few of the legislative priorities of the General Assembly. We are defending in the Supreme Court SB 3 and HB 2, the redistricting litigation that was passed in the 2022 session. We had a trial in the Franklin Circuit Court in April of 2022. The Supreme Court accepted transfer of the appeal of that case, and that case will be argued on September 19th. We are defending at the present time in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals the challenge to SB 150 passed in the most recent session. That, of course, is the Do No Harm Act, and some of its provisions relating to the use of puberty blockers for minors and cross-sex hormones have been challenged in the United States District Court for the Western District of Kentucky. That court issued an injunction the day before the bill would have gone into effect on June 29th. The Sixth Circuit issued a stay of a similar case in Tennessee involving the analogous law that state passed, consolidated our case with the Tennessee case, and in light of the Sixth Circuit's decision, last week the district court issued a stay of its own injunction. So that case is in the briefing process. We are filing our merits brief today in the Sixth Circuit on that case. That case will be argued, the court has said, sometime in the next 6 weeks, and the case should be decided by September 30th. So that's obviously a major case. We have successfully defended the legislature's passage of the Human Life Protection Act and the Heartbeat Law. We had a trial, a one-day evidentiary hearing in the Jefferson Circuit Court in June of 2022. That court issued an injunction. On August 1st, we obtained a stay of that injunction from the Court of Appeals, and before it was all said and done, the Supreme Court issued an opinion ruling that the challengers to that law did not have what's called third-party standing. So in other words, the abortion providers and the ACLU could not bring the claims of the women who might come to them for abortions. So with that, the plaintiffs, the EMW and Planned Parenthood abortion providers voluntarily dismissed their case. So that law is now fully in effect in the Commonwealth of Kentucky and has been since August 1 of 2022 when abortions, elective abortions, effectively were stopped in Kentucky. I want to give you just sort of an overview of some of the other litigation we're doing. We are continually defending the legislature's priorities. We intervened in a variety of lawsuits to stave off challenges under the Constitution because we knew, presumably, that the Beshear administration would not defend those laws. So we are defending SB 7 in the Franklin Circuit Court, Division 1. That law prevents the automatic payroll deductions for payment of labor organization dues and political contributions. A similar challenge to that law was brought in the Jefferson Circuit Court, and we also intervened in that case. We are defending the challenge to the constitutionality of the Kentucky Public Charter School Law, again in Franklin Circuit Court, Division 1. We intervened to defend the constitutionality of Senate Bill 1 from the 2022 session. That bill has to do with the authority of the Jefferson County School Board to manage the day-to-day operations of that organization, and that lawsuit is ongoing. We defended in, again, the Franklin Circuit Court, Division 1, the challenge to HB 563, which created the Educational Opportunity Pilot Program. Some other things that we are doing right now, we have issued recently an opinion that addresses what we think is the flawed guidance issued by the Kentucky Department of Education regarding the proper interpretation of SB 150, not only the state law provisions, but also the notion that school boards that follow the law would be violating Title IX of the federal law. We don't believe that's the case, and we issued an opinion to that effect. We are defending the challenge to SB 126, which was the law passed by the legislature to allow for a change of venue whenever a challenge to the constitutionality of a statute is brought. Currently, those are heard in the Franklin Circuit Court. The legislature passed the law that allows the Attorney General or any party within 30 days to file a notice of transfer, and then requires the clerk of the Supreme Court to randomly select a new circuit court. There are multiple challenges to that law, most of which, I believe both of which, are coming in the context of the gray machines litigation, which is also being challenged as unconstitutional, and we are also defending that in the Franklin Circuit Court and the Jefferson Circuit Court. We have a wide variety of other cases. I won't go through them all. I want to tell you briefly about our opioid litigation. We, of course, have been implementing the settlements of those cases. We've confirmed settlements bringing in over $840 million in settlement money to the Commonwealth, evenly split between the general or the state treasury and the local governments. Many of those cases were filed by the previous administration, Attorney General Beshear, in 2018. Since General Cameron has been Attorney General, we have brought at least 3 additional cases. We sued CVS and settled that case for $94,500,000. We sued Allergan and settled that case for almost $49 million. And we negotiated with Walmart and, without filing a lawsuit, settled that case for $53.5 million. So together with the cases that Attorney General Beshear initially brought, we have brought nearly $900 million. Much of that is being distributed according to the law that the General Assembly passed, creating the Kentucky Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission. and that work is ongoing. There's been one round of awards. There'll be another round, I believe, in September. There may be other settlements of opioid cases. There is a case involving the Purdue Pharma company that is in front of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. If that case is affirmed by that court, there will be another $50 million coming to Kentucky. And there are other cases that are being negotiated. I want to give you just a quick view of some of the things we've done with respect to the General Assembly's priorities involving the environment and the energy sector. We obtained a stay of the Biden administration's so-called Good Neighbor Rule, which looks at monitoring stations in Connecticut and Philadelphia and says that power plants in Kentucky are causing those measuring stations to be out of compliance with federal law. The EPA tried to impose a federal law, a federal rule on the state and reject the state's state implementation plan. We went to the district court and then in the Sixth Circuit obtained a stay of that ruling. We obtained a stay of the Biden administration's so-called Waters of the United States rule, which would have taken away a dramatic amount of the power of this body to pass laws and provide for the rules and regulations governing the waters of this state, as well as all of the lands that are adjacent to those waters and feed into those bodies. So in our view, this was a dramatic overreach by the federal government that would have hamstrung Kentucky farmers and small businesses, and we successfully got a stay of that. Of course, the ruling on the merits is yet to come. We have been pursuing the Biden administration's war on coal and fossil fuels generally by investigating its so-called pursuit of net zero priorities. These are imposed at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission level, at the EPA, at the Federal Highway Administration. We have challenged rules in all of those agencies and many others that all have the singular purpose of eliminating the use of fossil fuels, whether it's in gasoline, whether it's in power plants, whether it's in industrial manufacturing. And we have had some success in doing that. All told, we have either filed or joined over 25 lawsuits against the Biden administration's rules and regulations, many of them in that area. I want to give you just a quick overview of some of the other areas of the office. In our Consumer Protection Office, since General Cameron's been in office, we have had a total of 7,414 price gouging complaints. These are complaints claiming that the price of gasoline is too high, or that the price during the pandemic emergency, the price of toilet paper or diapers or basic commodities were too high. We take each of those complaints, we investigate them, and if they are well stated or have a solid foundation, then we pursue them and have on many occasions been able to negotiate voluntary compliance by the perpetrators, or to find that there was no merit to the complaint. It's noteworthy that I think since March of 2020, there has been a state of emergency in place at either throughout the Commonwealth or in selected counties throughout the Commonwealth every day since March of 2020. Some of these had to do with the pandemic, some of them had to do with the tornadoes, some of them had to do with the floods. The most recent state of emergency is initiated by Governor Beshear, had to do with the winter storm of December 2022, so that those states of emergency are still in effect. We still get price gouging complaints from at least those counties where those laws are in effect. After the tornadoes in western Kentucky, we set up an operation in the affected counties down there to create a contractor registration program requiring that contractors doing business who would then be doing roofing work or tree removal work or other work that dealt with the affected properties would register with those county governments so that local residents would be able to know that they were dealing with an approved and a reputable contractor. And that eliminated, we think, a lot of the out-of-state fly-by-night contractors who come in and deal with those sorts of disasters. This was in Graves County, Caldwell County, Hopkins, Muhlenberg County, and a few others. Just want to mention our Office of Senior Protection has handled over 8,400 cases involving complaints from consumers. We bring consumers together, we mediate complaints that they have, we try to alert people to scams, and otherwise head off a lot of the problems that seniors and other people might have in that area. So there are a lot of other things that the office is doing. I will just tell you that we're very busy. We appreciate the support of the administration, of the legislature. Our budget was increased from 2022 to 2023 by about $3 million. We used that to hire more lawyers, more staff. We opened offices in the Bowling Green area. We opened offices in London. We created a renewed presence in our Prestonsburg office, and we have assigned more people to our Jefferson County office as well. I don't want to take all the time. Blake is going to tell you quickly about our legislative priorities.
So we received a request to simply set out a couple of things that perhaps this body could look at doing in the upcoming session. I'll try to be as quick as I can in moving through them. I will lay out a couple of conditions first. Number one is that the folks who have our jobs next year may agree or disagree with everything we're about to say. So I'll put that condition there. And the second is we leave this entirely up to this body to determine what merit or how to pursue these proposals going forward. The first is one that I think this body, a couple representatives here are already pursuing, and that is looking at 446 and the language that is there and potentially bringing it into greater philosophical alignment with this body's views. 446 says all statutes of this state shall be liberally construed with the intent to promote their objectives and carry out the intent of the legislature. For a lot of us, I think we would look at that statute and say it would be better if the statutes were strictly construed, and so the text would govern. You can always bring in the intent of the legislature through other means of statutory interpretation without necessarily having to have a statute that sort of gives that intent priority. I know we have a couple of legislators who are sort of working on tweaking that language already. The second thing is we mentioned the opioid settlement dollars that have come in. We have a couple of cases that are going through bankruptcy proceeding now. The bankruptcy orders from those cases will sort of govern how those dollars are dispersed. We want to make sure that KRS 15.291 and 293 provides a plan for how to treat those dollars that come in from the bankruptcy proceedings. And so we may need to add a couple lines in those two statutes to make sure that we're qualifying for all the money that we can from those bankruptcy orders. The last thing we would put for your consideration is we've had a lot of feedback regarding solar farms and wind farms that may be proposed or currently in consideration by utilities. We'll note that KRS 100 provides that a utility can declare eminent domain and bypass local government approval to put in place a power plant. Most of those power plants are looking at 20 or 30 acres. Solar or wind farm, by contrast, is many, many times that acreage. And so, and by contrast, if you were a private entity trying to create a solar or wind farm, you would have to get local government approval in order to build that farm. But now, under the law, if you're a utility, you wouldn't. So there may be an opportunity there to bring those two statutes in synergy and also sort of protect the amount of developmental land right, in some of these small towns that may become subject to solar and wind farms into the future, and give local government control there. That's all I had. Thank you.
Very good, gentlemen. We have two more presenters, and we asked the AG's office to come in and give us an update on the work that their office is doing. So Representative Bratcher has a question, but we're not going to debate issues, just process or questions about where cases are at. We could be here all day if we got into debating issues. So Representative Bratcher.
Man, I wanted to debate some issues, Robbie. No, how many, do you have a number of how many cases you're engaged with the Supreme Court, the top court? Is there a number?
I don't have a
Close number.
Representative Bratcher, I don't have a specific number. I think it's at least a dozen cases where we are defending laws in one from one session or another. We have, I believe, 4 Supreme Court arguments coming up before the end of September.
Do you know which one is has been in front of the Supreme Court the longest? I've always got an issue with how long they take to make a decision, and I just don't understand why. What is the longest one? You said something about Senate Bill 3 has been there since last session. Was that it?
Well, Senate Bill 3 was the redistricting bill. That's actually moving relatively quickly because the court accepted transfer, so it bypassed the Court of Appeals. That case is a little bit slower than it might have been because we tried the case in April. The circuit court, Judge Wingate, issued his opinion, I believe, in the second week of November. So
what's the longest one that's been hanging out up there?
I'm sorry, I can get that for you.
Is it more than a year at the Supreme Court level?
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
2 years?
I couldn't say that. I'd have to check. And I'd want to talk to our Solicitor General, who's sort of the font of wisdom on all those statistics.
Just amazes me that it could sit there that long without a decision. We have to make bills in 60 days, and then the super legislature over there comes along and decides that they're going to take 2 years to decide what's good and what's bad over there. It's just aggravating. I know you have nothing to do with that, and you don't want to say anything about that, but I do.
You're welcome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your hard work, all the efforts that you're protecting the bills that come out of the legislature. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're very welcome. Next on the agenda is the Kentucky State Treasurer. Treasurer Ball is here with us, and the floor is yours. It's your microphone.
Okay, very good. Now
There
it's
you go.
on. And I'll also let you know I've got 2 people with me. I have my Deputy Treasurer, Chief of Staff, Lauren Ferguson, and then I have on this side. You switched to where I thought you were going to go. And then I have my Communications Director and my Policy Advisor, Matt Fry, with me too. So they are backing me up. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we've done in the Treasury. And some of you know all this because I talk to you quite often. But just a quick overview of things that have happened while I've been in office. You know the nuts and bolts of the job. I always describe it as a watchdog role, and that is its core function. So I make sure that the bills get paid on the Commonwealth of Kentucky. In that role, I also deal with our banking relationship. I take care of our deposits for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I also deal with our taxing issues. So I deal with the IRS because the state actually does pay taxes. So I deal with federal, state, and local withholding taxes for all state employees. We also record, monitor, and reconcile all transactions in the state depository and checking accounts. So that's actually a pretty big lift for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We balance the books, so that's always happening. And then we do a variety of other financial matters dealing with with making sure W-2s are out for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and we deal in different levels with different financial aspects, usually on different boards. So I'll go through that here in just a moment. Some things that were added while I've been treasurer are some things that are worth noting. One thing that's been here, but I've really focused on it, is the unclaimed property portion of the Treasury. And I always describe that as a statewide lost and found. That's the simplest way to understand it. I'm very proud of what I've been able to do in this role to boost that and get money out to people who are the rightful owners. I've actually returned $168 million of unclaimed property while I've been in office, which is more than any other treasurer. The record for a single term was my first term at $89 million, and so we are looking to beat that this time at the end of this year. So I'm very proud of what we've done on that, and that's even in the midst of a pandemic when we had people not in the office as available. So we've actually made it a lot more efficient. We updated some holder reporting tools, updated them, modernized them. That may sound a little dry to you all, but it really helps the public be able to get unclaimed property to us. And then we also did what we call fast tracking. So we have sped up considerably if it's a smaller claim. We always have to make sure that we're monitoring for fraud and problems, but we've been able to speed that up and get people's property back to them once we know that it's simple and it doesn't require a lot of documentation. So that's something that I'm proud of as well. We actually updated unclaimed property during my term. Of course, there's the General Assembly that passed the bills to get that done. But one thing worth noting in doing that, and it had been updated for the first time since I believe the 1980s. But one thing in particular that's worth noting is that we are the first state in the country to figure out what to do with cryptocurrency when it comes to unclaimed property. And we're now the model for the nation on what to do on that. I've had several from my office come and speak to other states about how to do that. So we were a trendsetter about how to handle this situation. I'm very proud of our work in that area. Just speaking of fraud, because fraud is something we're always paying attention to in unclaimed property, that is something that we always pay attention to in the Treasury as well. Being that watchdog role, it means that we are the front lines to protect against cyber fraud. We've had instances where we've stopped embezzlement, a variety of attacks on the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and so we are always mindful of that. We're always trying to be state of the art, making sure everybody is trained and ready to go. Our proudest moment was when we stopped an over $5 million fraud attempt that was very sophisticated, and we actually got national attention on being able to stop it because, like I said, it was sophisticated, and our team handled it the right way, and I'm very proud of what we've done on that. And of course, this is a recurring issue. We're always catching this, and we're always doing what we need to do on that, and this will be with us probably for the future, just because that's where the world is right now. Some other initiatives that you need to be aware of. Transparency is a priority to me. So in my first term, I worked to get a bill launched or a website launched called transparency.ky.gov. It's very intuitive. It tells you exactly what it is. And it's so you can Google your government. You can Google all executive expenditure and the judiciary on there. And I think that's helpful to the public. I also launched something called Stable Kentucky, which is a savings and investment program for people with disabilities. And I'm very proud of how we're able to figure that one out. When I first got in office, I was told this would be something that would be extremely helpful to Kentuckians, and I was all for it. And then we began to look at the cost of it. And like many things, it looked like it was going to be cost prohibitive. We were looking at upwards of $1 million to be able to operate this. So we had to be creative, and we did find a creative solution to how to solve this. We ended up doing a partnership with the state of Ohio, and they needed people and we needed processes. So we were able to do this together to work this out, and it is now a thriving, successful program in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We have about 1,000 people participating in it, and I think it really does help people with disabilities throughout the Commonwealth. Another thing that has been something that I brought to the table is financial literacy, and Kentucky is now a national leader on financial literacy. I'm very proud of the work that we've been able to do on this issue. I pushed and encouraged to get a high school requirement passed, and you all passed that to make sure that people have training on financial literacy before they're through with school. And I pushed to get a commission housed in the Treasury to make sure that schools and other groups had resources they needed to be able to teach financial literacy. This was another creative solution. I didn't want to cost the taxpayers more money to be able to take on this responsibility, so we had to figure out how are we going to have resources available without a higher cost. So this commission is able to receive funds from the private sector, and it does. Right now it is fully supported by the private sector, and we have a program available to every school in the Commonwealth of Kentucky that's at the high school level to teach financial literacy for free because of the work that we've done with the Financial Empowerment Commission. So that is available now. The Commission also provides financial literacy for other groups, something that has really taken off that was sort of unexpected, but it's really met a need. Is we've been providing training to local governments throughout Kentucky. We've had several cities, now we're starting to have some counties offer financial literacy training because there are things available to public sector workers that are just unique to them. And it is a wonderful way to improve government in a lot of levels. So I'm proud of how we've been able to advance that. Among other things, we also help people with disabilities, low-income families, young adults, aging Kentuckians, people who are former military, retired from the military. So we have a broad mandate on financial literacy and how to help those individuals, and we've been doing that. In addition, as some of you may recall, a major initiative from my office has been pushing back against the ESG movement in order to protect our investments in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I do deal with our investments as treasurer, so I asked for and encouraged to get a bill passed, and you all did it, so thank you, that we refer to as the Fossil Fuel Boycott Bill. And that bill says if you are boycotting the fossil fuel industries, those are signature industries in Kentucky, then Kentucky's not going to include you in our pensions, and we're not going to have a government contract with you. And so we issued at the Treasury a list of 11 companies that were engaged in fossil fuel boycotts. And then we're already making sure that the law is being complied with in regards to those 11 institutions. And then in the course of the last 2 years, the Attorney General and I worked together to get an opinion out which clarified that it is illegal in the Commonwealth of Kentucky to invest in ESG. We had some issues making sure that that was being followed through on all levels. So you all passed a bill which made Kentucky the strongest anti-ESG state in the nation. And I think that it's just a wonderful example to the whole state about here we make sure we are protecting our pensions. We're making sure that our pensioners can retire. And I'm just encouraged about the commitment that the General Assembly has shown on that, and I think it's going to have a huge payout for the future. So those are things that have been happening in the Commonwealth of Kentucky in regards to the Treasury. Some things to look forward for the future. I have tried to get this place in good shape for when I leave. I'm only here for a few more months and somebody else will take my spot. So I've tried to make sure that everything is ready to go for the successor, but there are a few things that I think do need to be addressed. And of course, this will be up to whoever my successor is, but just to give you a heads up of some things I think that would be worthwhile. The Kentucky Financial Empowerment Board right now, it has a presence from the Federal Reserve, but the Commonwealth of Kentucky is divided into two areas, and we actually have Federal Reserve support from two different locations. So our statute at this point only has it from the St. Louis Federal Reserve. We also want the Cleveland Federal Reserve. So I think that would be an improvement to alternate when one rotates off, get someone from the other Federal Reserve so that we have a presence. And another issue that I think is something that somebody will want to take care of right away, and this is probably just an oversight for some point in the past, but only unclaimed property has a regulatory statutory authority to be able to issue regulations for that area. The rest of the Treasury, no one can issue regulations for the rest of the Treasury. I think it was just an oversight. We operate based on internal policies at this point, which is not the best way to run government. You need to have notice and opportunity for comment. So that needs to be addressed. We actually were unaware of it because it hadn't come up until this year. And we figured out that we needed some regulations for some issues in the Treasury portion that's not unclaimed property, and we discovered that there was no authority for doing that. So that's something that I think needs to be addressed. It's probably not something that comes up very often, but when it does, it's important. And I think that needs to be done for the future. One thing that was passed, and it was something that we thought would be useful when money was right, it was an unclaimed property trust fund. And we have a lot of unclaimed property money that comes in all throughout the year. And I've always thought that it might be a useful thing to take some of those monies and invest them so that way the unclaimed property portion can be funded on its own and doesn't have to go to the General Assembly for funds ever. And that's something that is in existence if the General Assembly ever decides that there's enough funds to be able to do something like that. It exists, and I think it would be a worthwhile endeavor to do something like that. Those are the main things. We have some issues with some records retentions that we want to update. That would be something for the future. But those are the highlights of things that we have done while I've been in office. Those are the things that I think need to be done. And then just by way of a quick overview too, I just want to mention the boards that I'm on, just so that you understand that as well. I sit on the Deferred Compensation Authority Board, the Kentucky Financial Empowerment Commission Board, the Kentucky Lottery Board, Kentucky Teachers Retirement System, KIA and Kieslick, the Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission, the State Investment Commission, as well as the Kentucky Asset Liability Commission. So all of them are financially related in some part. So that is my overview for today.
Thank you, Treasurer Ball. You're very busy, and we appreciate your work. We have Senator McDaniel has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief comment, Madam Treasurer. Thank you for being here again. One thing about you is I don't think you have any less energy today than the first time you appeared in front of one of our committees, but certainly this is the kind of probably going to be one of the last time we see you in this capacity in front of one of these committees. So just wanted to say fine job, especially with some of the unclaimed property stuff over the last several years on making your office more financially independent, which as the budget chair I always appreciate. And certainly it's been a pleasure working together in your term as treasurer, and appreciate you and hope we get to continue to work together in the future. So
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, ma'am.
Representative All, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Treasurer Ball. I do have a question in the unclaimed property space. I actually worked in that area many years ago for a former treasurer. What is the total amount of dollars in the unclaimed treasury account now versus when you came in? And it seems like every treasurer brags about returning the most ever because the fund just keeps growing, and I just wonder if that happens to be the case now.
Yeah, so it does always come in all the time, and so we have about $800 million right now in unclaimed property. It does always grow, and I think it was probably a little over $500 million when I first came in office. So it's the kind of thing that it's just always growing, and that's one reason why I wanted to be very aggressive about making sure we get unclaimed property out, which I've been able to do, $168 million while I've been in office. And then we're looking to have a record second term. We should beat the record for one term, I think, this time around. We have an ambitious goal for the rest of this year. We may or may not meet it. I won't tell you what it is in case we don't meet it. But we have an ambitious goal to be able to do that.
I appreciate that. I think when I worked there, it was like $300 million, so it just
grows.
continues to grow. So maybe that is something, Chairman McDaniel, we could do where we got a little extra money there. We can do something creative with. Thank you, Treasurer.
Thank you.
Representative Tipton has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Treasurer Ball, thank you for your hard work. It's obvious that you have a full agenda, and I do have a question about one of the boards that you serve on. You are one of the 11 members on the Teacher Retirement System Board of Trustees. That is, as a member of the Public Pension Oversight Board, that's an area that I am keenly interested in. TRS, the unfunded liability expense there is one of the major expenses to the Commonwealth, and it's going to continue to grow for the next 20-some years. I was wondering if you could, since you've been there for almost 8 years now, could you give us some perspective on where you've seen TRS come from the time that you started to now, and some insight and maybe some ideas and recommendations the General Assembly might look at going forward? Thank you.
Sure, that's a good question, and that actually would I probably need more time to really go into a lot on that one. But what I will say, I think it's in better shape now than it was when I first got there. A lot of that is the work that's been done for the General Assembly, just making sure that it is solvent, and really the key to it is that making sure the budget always puts that money in there. I know that it hurts a little bit to put that money in there, but that's how we got in this mess to begin with. When I first got there, I actually spent some time meeting with the leadership over there, asking them, give me an overview over the last several decades and really since its inception for how we got to where we are. And they spent a lot of time with me, and I talked to a lot of other people just to try and figure out why are we in the mess that we're in. And of course, TRS is actually the better funded one. KPPA is much less funded. I think it's 58% or just slightly over 58% for TRS, and I think it's about 18.9 for KPPA. And those are both not great numbers, but there's a big difference between the two numbers. So obviously, your all's commitment to make sure the money is there is what stems the loss and puts it in a solvent position. It's a lot like paying a mortgage. You have to make sure you have a plan, and they do have a plan. They do have a 30-year plan. It's probably a little less than 30 years now. And I feel very encouraged about the work that you all have done. It puts them in strong shape. I think that they are investing well right now. From what I have been involved with, I feel like it's on good footing. Investments are a little bit difficult right now. A lot of people are it's just an unusual time in the investment world. This is one of the reasons why I've pushed very, very hard to be wise and cautious when it comes to the ESG push. There's been just a massive push on that to play around and try and get certain social outcomes with your investments. And I really believe, especially if you have underfunded pensions, that your priority has to be making sure you're getting good returns. Like, I'm 100% committed to that. I'm entirely convinced. So that is one reason why I pushed very, very hard. I'm encouraged that the leadership at TRS shares that view that I have had. That's not true for everybody in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I've had issues with other people, but the leadership at TRS has been in agreement, and of course now they're legally required. So it's, whether they agree or not, this is the way it is. But they do agree, and they do have a commitment to making sure that returns are priority number one, especially when it comes to outside pushes for novel ESG attempts.
Okay, we have two more questions. We're going to cut our questions off here. Representative Decker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had some dental work this morning. I hope my mouth works all right. I just wanted to actually report and comment on last year when I was at ERIC. Treasurer Ball invited me to come to a meeting of the Association of State Treasurers, and I was delighted to see she was giving a speech there. And I was not surprised, but I was pleased that they recognized her as a superstar among the state treasurers. She was talking about the legislation she was going to be pursuing on the ESG, and she pointed out, and in her introduction they noted that it took her as a lawyer to help them see that even without legislation, these pension boards have fiduciary duties. So I just wanted this body to know that she is a superstar. Of course, we already knew that, but it was good to see it confirmed by others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that is the end of our questions.
Very good.
Treasurer Ball, thank you so much for being here, and your staff. Always good to work with. So thank y'all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Our final item on our agenda are folks from the executive branch. If you want to come forward to talk about the Capitol and Annex renovations, Mr. Hicks, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Ruth, or whoever's coming. Thank y'all for being here today. I fielded quite a few questions from folks that come to Frankfurt about scaffolding and things like that, and things parked on and wanting to know what's going on with our annex and Capitol, and I know we're about ready to embark on or even more work. So thank y'all for being here to give us a review on these projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm John Hicks, Secretary of the Governor's Executive Cabinet and State Budget Director. And go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm Holly Johnson. I am the Secretary of the Finance and Administration Cabinet.
Sam Ruth, Commissioner of Facilities.
Thank you for having us here, Mr. Chairman. Just a little background. It's a $287 million project to renovate our state capitol, $260 million of which was appropriated in the budget we're currently implementing, so from the 22 session. Earlier elements began with the design of mechanical and electrical upgrades and some exterior renovations, i.e. the dome. You see the scaffolding there. So that was from earlier funds in prior budgets. The architect and engineering firm has been selected for the project. Our EOP and PDP are the name of the firms that we're working with. The design of the full project is well underway and expected to be completed by around February of 2024. The current plan is to let construction bids, in the spring of 2024 after that. The entire project is estimated to take about 3.5 years to complete. And there are many challenges and concerns in dealing with such a historic building and all the logistics of contending with renovation of such a large facility with its historic heritage and some of its significant physical plant problems. So the concerns, so there have been communications from the architects working with Commissioner Ruth and Secretary Johnson with all of the branches of government and all of the occupants of the Capitol building in terms of contending with the sequence of events that will ultimately play out in renovating this facility. So I'll turn it over to Secretary Johnson.
Sure. As the plans got underway, the Finance and Administration Cabinet began preliminary discussions earlier this year with current occupants of the Capitol building, the Governor's Office, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Court of Justice, and LRC about the process and timing of relocating during the project's construction. These discussions will continue as the construction plans are finalized. The Finance and Administration Cabinet is examining relocation options that will meet the space needs of the Capitol building's occupants. This will likely involve the leasing of privately owned space. These discussions will continue in earnest this summer. Well, continuing this summer. Final determinations still remain to be made. We don't yet have concrete dates or locations. The sequence of construction project will impact the timing of the move of the Capitol's occupants.
And Mr. Chairman, I want to make everyone aware that the affected agency budgets, those who are occupying the Capitol now, they will be held harmless because the project's budget will pick up the additional costs that Secretary Johnson just referred to in terms of if we have additional lease space and occupying that space. So in terms of preparing for the next budget, the project's going to take care of those costs for those respective entities. So they don't need additional resources for that purpose. As to the legislative branch, the architectural firm and the Finance Administration Cabinet have had several discussions and are considering various options to accommodate your all's needs. And just to add to Secretary Johnson's comments, discussions have been held with the judicial branch, and they're considering various options to accommodate their needs for the Court of Justice during the project's constructions. So that's our overview, Mr. Chairman, and be happy to answer your questions.
I just have a couple of questions. You said it was a 3.5-year project. When did the clock start, or like when does it start?
I think the 3.5 years, Commissioner Wright, was related to construction time, right? So if we let bids this next spring, that's kind of the clock starting.
All right. So we're not in that 3.5 years yet,
right?
Correct. Okay. And then just a question about the contractor that was chosen. How was the contractor chosen, and was there multiple bids received, or how was that? What was that process like?
That was
the EOP and the PDP companies.
We followed our normal processes for selecting EOP. Architect firms submit their proposal, we evaluate them and select one.
Yep. Was that a single bidder, or was there multiple bidders?
I do not recall. I'd have to.
Could you let me know that?
Yes.
Okay. Questions? That's one of the luxuries of going third in the meeting sometimes. So thank you so much. We at least know who we can contact and call. We know the face as far as questions moving forward in the next several years. So thank y'all for the very quick update. And if you could report that back, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The last thing is just to announce our next meeting is August the 24th. That's going to be at the State Fair. And that is on a Thursday. So if there aren't any other questions, motion to adjourn be in order.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor, say aye. We're adjourned.